Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm James, continuing on with our Balsa USA Stingray 120 build. Alright, so in the last video of this build series, I installed the motor mount. And this time, I'm going to drill out the holes for locating the engine properly on the engine mount itself. So I'm going to drill those out and get it set in the right location. And then I'm also going to drill out a couple of the openings in the firewall. So those are going to be the access points for the control rods to come through and connect to the choke and to the throttle, right? And then I'm also going to drill a hole in the firewall, just open it up a bit so that right behind the choke, where the choke will be, and where the intake of the carburetor will be, and just so that I can get a little better airflow around the engine. Because this is kind of a confined area in here, and obviously it's going to be opened up on the bottom, going to be plenty of air, but I'm just going to go ahead and add a hole right back here. Since it's so close, it's going to end up being so close to the firewall, I thought I would open up and just allow a little bit more airflow in that area. So to attach the engine, I'm going to be using these 832 by 1 inch cap screws. And they're probably going to be a little bit too long. I was trying to find some shorter ones, but they didn't have them at the store. I went to Home Depot and got these. And they're going to have to be a little bit shorter because if you look, I don't have very much room below my engine mount. The engine mount is located really far up into the compartment here, and I don't have very much room before I start getting close to the top of the fuselage. So I will have to trim those back a little bit, I think. And then I'll be using also these 832 nuts and also these number 8 lock washers to help hold everything. And then I will use a thread locker also to help keep it nice and tight and secure. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and drill out the locations on the engine mount, but I'm not going to bolt the engine in at this time because I'm still working with the plane and I don't want it getting in the way. It's going to be heavy, so I'm just going to go ahead and take it back off as I continue on with the build. Okay, well, if you remember from my last video, I mentioned that the carburetor adjustment screws, the mixture adjustment screws, are located on the bottom of the carburetor here. And because I'm mounting this engine inverted and because I closed off the top of the fuselage here, I wouldn't be able to access those adjustment screws if I need to. And that would be a problem. So in my last video I mentioned that I was thinking about opening up a access point, or basically a hole, just kind of cut a window in here and just have it left open like that so that I can get to the carburetor from the bottom like that and make those adjustments. Well, some of you have suggested I should just go ahead and put a hatch in here. And I thought about it and I'm thinking, you know, I could probably do that. So I've been thinking about a couple ways to do that. So in addition to cutting the holes in the back and drilling out the mounting holes for the engine, I thought in this video I would go ahead and try to construct a little hatch for the front part of the engine here. And then the other thing is, just so you know, I will be making a hatch eventually, probably later on. I'll be making a hatch in the top of this compartment because this is where the fuel tank is going to be, and also probably where my servos are going to be for the throttle and the choke. So I need to put a hatch in here because I won't be able to see any of that once everything's closed off. So I'm going to set the engine so that the front of the propeller drive hub is about a 1/4 inch in front of the fuselage. That'll give me about that much room between the propeller and the fuselage. And then the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get some tape, and I'm going to put some tape on the mounts here. I'm going to set this in where I think it needs to be, somewhere like right around here, and I'll mark the location of the holes onto the tape that I put on the engine mount there, and then we'll drill it out. Now, what's kind of cool about this, it's going to make it a little bit easier for me. You know, the engine is in here pretty snug. It can't go too far left or right. It's got a little bit of play in there when I press it down. So I want to make sure that it's nice and straight and aligned along the thrust line or the center line of the engine. And what's nice about this particular setup right now is that I can use my square here, and I have these cooling fins on top of the engine head here, cylinder head, and I can take my square and put it on my firewall right here, and then look down on it and line up the fins with my square here, and that'll get me aligned in the right location. So again, if you remember from the previous video on this one, I mentioned that there is not an angled thrust line. There is no angled down thrust. There is no angled right thrust on this, or I guess it'd be, yeah, angles to the right. And typically you have an angled thrust line on an RC plane build like this, but for some reason this one does not, and not sure why that is. And I've looked it up, and I've tried to get some information looking at some of the older forms and such, and it seems like that's kind of the deal with this plane. So we'll see how that impacts the flight of the plane. But if for some reason when I get this thing going and I feel that I need to put some side thrust into it, I can come back and kind of take it. It's not going to be easy, but I could take the mount back out and maybe put some spacers behind it to kind of get it kinked over a little bit. But you know, hopefully I don't have to do that. So in any case, I'm going to go ahead and go forward with the way it's done in the instructions and the plans. So, you know, like many things we do when we're building kits like this, is there's many ways to skin a cat and a lot of personal preference on how everybody wants to do different steps and how they do things. So locating the mounting holes on an engine mount like this is one of those things. There's a variety of ways to do it. You know, some people, or sometimes I've used, depending on the build, kind of what I'm doing, how much room I have, and so on and so forth. Sometimes I like to use something like an owl like this because it's got the pointy end and I can push it in. I can put the engine on here, put it through the hole, and mark a location like that. Sometimes you can just use maybe a drill bit, and you know, other methods you can use like a skinny, if you have a skinny enough you know, Phillips screwdriver that has a point on it, you can mark it that way. And there's even been tools that have been made for doing this. Great Plains used to make, well, when Great Plains was in business, they used to make like a centering tool for doing this. But there's a variety of ways of doing it. So, but this time I'm going to go ahead, and what I like to do, which is kind of, I've found to be kind of a easy way to do it, is again, just put some tape on here, put the engine on, and mark the location of the holes onto the tape so you can see it, because obviously this is black, it's kind of hard to mark on there. And what I like to do, if it works out, is use the actual screw itself like this, and then I get a Sharpie and I kind of lather it up with ink as much as I can, and then press it through and trying to push and then kind of just imprint where the actual screw will go, and that'll give me a really nice location. The reason I like doing it that way is because the screw fills the hole completely. Now if you're using something, let me move this out of the way. If you're using something like an owl or a nail or something like that, you can see that if you're trying to poke it in like right along your engine here, it's hard to get it lined up in the hole, you know, properly. So you can mark it and then you'll be off like this. So it's hard to get it exactly like in the middle. That's why maybe using a skinnier nail or something to get in there to get it nice and straight is the way you want to do it. So you just have to be careful and kind of think about what you're doing, and hopefully you get everything's lined up the way it needs to be. And again, this is nice because it's the hole, it'll fit right through the hole nice and straight, and then it'll mark right below where it needs to be. So I find this method to be pretty useful, and I like doing this way a lot. Okay, well that step is finished. Now, you know, for me, when I'm building planes, I always think ahead about kind of how I want to do something. I have this vision about the steps I want to take and how I want to go about it. And then a lot of times as I start doing it, I realize along the way that maybe that's not going to work and I have to change it up or, you know, do something different. That happens a lot to me. So if you see me bouncing around in these videos, that's kind of why. You know, there's no, you know, for me, there's no set rules on how to do all this stuff. So sometimes things seem to make sense when I start them, and then when I finish them, I think, boy, I could have done that differently or a lot easier. Like, for example, this little slot I kind of did back in here. I was thinking I would sort of just kind of go around it, outline it, and then break it out. And I could have just done the same thing probably by just drilling 2 bigger holes and then sanding it out. So in any case, that's you know, that's what happens. And then this hole down here that I drilled, I wanted to mention what I used for that. All right, so you saw me using this thing. So this is I guess it's a kind of a drill circular saw thing. And this, if you're not familiar with it, this is what you use when you're putting in door locks. When you're putting in a doorknob with a lock, you drill this in. I don't know what part they call that. Hold on a second. So this is just used to drill out this smaller hole when you're putting in a lock set. You know, you can buy these in a kit. They come with a bigger hole cutting kind of saw for the knob area, and then you got the smaller ones you drill in this way. So those are pretty common. You can find them at your hardware store and such, but I just thought I would use it for this, and it worked out pretty good. Okay, well, you know, I'm not suggesting to run out to a hardware store and buy a door lock installation kit just to get something like this to drill a hole or do something on your RC planes. But you know, everything's fair game. If you have other tools lying around, try things out. And a lot of times I find other things that work well in certain situations, and this time this worked out pretty good for this. In any case, that's that. I mentioned in the first part of this video that I was going to put a little access hatch for these mixture adjustment screws on the carburetor. But what I decided to do now is, because if I did that now, this video would get pretty long. So since I have to put a hatch here, and I'm also going to be putting one back here where the fuel tank's going to be and the servos for the engine, I thought I would do that in one video. So the next video I'll do that. I'll cut a hatch for here, and I'll cut a hatch for here. Okay, so that's going to be about it for now. And thanks for watching my channel. I always appreciate it, and we will see you next time.